Hello, welcome to Gary's Garage. This is my first recording in here. Just trying it out to see how it looks. Basically, what we got going on in here is a work area where I look at different projects. I do woodworking and electronics and all sorts of gadgets and gizmos and soldering, and there's a fairly large supply of alcoholic beverages in here too. So welcome. Here's a tour. So as you can see above me here, we have AWA World Championship signed posters and Evel Knievel original BMX bike from back in the day. A couple of car signs and different lights and different tools. That memory box here put together from somebody who passed away and got their tools. We have an old grill from a 1946 Chevrolet. A couple of cool lights. Those actually light up, but they're 6 volt, so it takes kind of a contraption in order to get them to work. So they're not on, but they do work. They're kind of cool. Various tools and storage areas. And then if we look over on this side, we have, well, let me switch views here. Okay, this is better. I'm not in the shop, but take a look here. That's the old kitchen cabinets. We remodeled the kitchen. Various toolboxes. We got the decorative bomb. Some projects in work right now. Workbench. A couple of speakers, both high and low. You know, audio is important. The stereo in the corner. The nickel tour. So I look forward to working with this video production and working with certain projects and stuff, kind of showing you what's going on and what's happening in my world. Also for future generations. Grandpa Gary. Hello again. This is sanding time. We're basically doing a little sanding job on the speakers. What we're working with today are Klipsch Scala speakers. They're old school 70s speakers. They've already been worked on before. The person who did it before added some things to it and then finished it in a not great way. So, overall I think he did pretty good, but the final finish result was not so good. So I am taking the time, which is significant, to sand them down and refinish them so they look better. My plan with these are to probably just sell them because they're freaking huge, big, but they sound great. I mean, they were fun to play with for a while, but they're just too big for my living space. So, there's some value to them. So I'm going to be getting them cleaned up and moving them out the door pretty soon here. So if you're interested in a pair of speakers. All right, so let me show you what I'm dealing with real quick, and we'll see you soon. All right, so here are the speakers, fully torn down basically and ready to be sanded. I've already have one that's kind of off in the back there that I've been working on and got that one sanded that you can't see right now, but this one here I've been working on just today and started to get it sanded. Got the top rough sanded down using about 100 to 120 grit sandpaper. out of 60, so I can't really, and boy, you need it on this stuff. You'll see that the finish that they used was very, it's kind of gummy, you know. It almost looks like it was painted on with a brush, and you know, it's kind of gunky, and it has this kind of tackiness to it, and it never really like fully dried, so it's, you know, it just got to go. But because it's that tacky stuff, it goes through the sandpaper fast, or or vice versa. The sandpaper gums up with it, you know, so you have to change sandpaper quite often to get through that, and then down to sandable surface, where then you can start working out, you know, the stain that this person used. That's another thing that I don't like. I don't like stain. I'm more of a, you know, raw wood kind of a thing, especially when you're dealing with, you know, something like this, which is you know, an antique. It's kind of an original piece of furniture that, you know, people would probably use in their homes. So this is a big thing, but it's a fairly, you know, it's a fairly desired thing. I don't see, if you can see that, I'll lower the stand a little bit so maybe we can get a better view. Oh, all right. And then maybe tip it so you can kind of see a little bit better. It's a, you know, the speaker itself is fairly big, and I have them on wheels right now, just for resanding and moving them around quite a bit. I do the sanding outside so as not to get the work area be messy. So, but I mean, even like these little pieces of trim here, which is not original to the speaker, it was just an open plywood look, to be honest. And then somebody came along here and did this, and I'm considering taking them out, but I'm worried there's already damage to the face of the plywood, and that would distract from the look of it. So we'll see what I do here, see if it makes it or not. But right now I'm sanding it down, and it's just so gummy, it just takes forever to eat through it with sandpaper, where you can get an actual sandable surface like we have here, you know. So it just takes time, a lot of sandpaper, and one hell of a sander. Here's my sander. That is a DeWalt palm sander, and it uses a quarter sheet of sandpaper, and it is the best thing ever made, period. Love this thing. Completely works the way you want it to, and it's, you know, probably has 20,000 hours on it. And it's never dead, never died. So here's me, here's the speaker. That's all. That's you can tell it's pretty big. There's a giant horn that sits right here, that has the mid-range of the sound, and then the hole above here is where the tweeter will sit. There's a crossover network that sits back here, and that's upgraded tweeter and crossover network to the crates setup, 4500 setup, actually to be precise. The crossover point 4500. Anyways, this will all be sanded, and that's a pretty tricky area, especially considering the stuff he used. So it's just going to take a lot of time to do it right. But we're well on the way. As you can see, we have one side completely done there, and then the top's done, rough sanded, and then the front, you know, it's kind of a mix of things. It's kind of hard to get inside there. I'll have to do some blending because I'm not going to be able to get everything out of there. And then the fascia itself, you know, it's actually in pretty good shape. Just sanding it down. I mean, he covered that. Oh, pause. Sorry, that was the garage door. I forgot to set it so it wouldn't warn me. At any rate, okay, moving around. Oh yeah, he covered up the clipped tag with that stuff too. So, you know, on the other one, I kind of sanded it a little bit and made the copper more revealed, but you know, it's just a mess. The same thing with the tag. You can see the tag. Normally this is, you know, in pretty rough shape because was built in 1972, I believe, if I looked it up right. And, you know, normally you'd be able to read what the serial number is. It's stamped here on the unit itself, so you can tell what the serial numbers are and so forth. But, you know, it's usually here, and there's a signature on it. And he just totally covered it up with that goop, and it just ruined it, you know. I mean, it made it stick better, but you can't read anything anymore, and, you know, it got all worn off. So both of the speakers are, you know, affected by that problem. So that's too bad. Really recoverable thing, and if it was original, it would be much better for the value of the speaker. Oh, all right. So dealing with sanding, black shirt, not a good idea. So we're about halfway there. We got a lot of work to do ahead of us, but you know, it'll be worth it, and it's a good, you know, standing there with the sander is kind of therapeutic. So I do take delight in that. The bad part of it is sandpaper is not exactly cheap, so you gotta kind of, and you go through quite a bit of it. So you gotta buy it in bulk. All right, so that's the update. We'll get back to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi again. Welcome to the next installment of the Scala refinishing project. We are on day 4, maybe 5. I got most of the cabinets sanded, rough sanded, on the outside. Today I'm going to focus on the inside grooves, the large horn area. Those are kind of hard to get. So along with my trusty palm sander, today I will be using a detail finish sander as well. So this is obviously similar in function, but it basically has a pointed end to it and has special sandpaper that you kind of, it's just kind of like a Velcro-y type surface, and it sticks to the bottom of the sander like so, and I'll position that right later, and then you can get into a little bit more nicks and crannies that way. So that's the other tool that I use. I have plenty of sandpaper to finish my job today, and my goal today is to have both of these large speakers sanded, finished sanded, so then I can apply a coat of oil on them maybe tomorrow. We'll see. So today, hopefully the final day of sanding, and we will pick it up in a little while. Thanks for watching. Okay, so this is basically the speaker that we're talking about. I have 2 of them. They're both pretty much finished sanded on the outside. You can tell they're looking pretty much raw wood. But I have to do the inside. You see how it kind of flares in. This section down in here has the same kind of material that's pretty hard to get rid of. So I'll be spending a couple hours probably today doing that. And then once I get that to my satisfaction, I'm going to finish sand them. Go with I'll go step up from a 120 to 180, and then to a 220, and we'll see from there. I might just leave it at 220. It might go up to 300. I'm not exactly sure yet, but I'll work on that. And then get rid of that guy, bring the other one out, and do it all again. Okay? So by the end of the day today, the hope is that we have this thing basically ready to stain or finish or however we want to do it. So that's the scoop. I'm not going to bore you with too much of the sanding project because that's just hours of so we won't do that. So anyways, show and tell. I'll show them when they're done, and we'll go from there. Okay. Oops, that reminds me. One thing I forgot to mention, ear protection. Make sure to put on something on your ears. You want to be able to hear after this is all done. So I'm going to get that. Be right back. Okay, so now I have my ear protection, my eye protection, and protection for my lungs. I'm going to start digging in. All right? So a good rule of thumb is to keep the thing moving. Don't let it sit too long in one space. It'll just take longer and be uneven there. So keep it moving in small circular motions, especially when you're doing the rough sanding. You can do the circle, you can go against the grain, you can just be aggressive. Don't be too aggressive, because most of this wood is not solid wood. It's usually a veneer or something like that. So you don't have a lot to work with. You don't want to burn through it, but on the other hand, you want to get that old stuff off. So you have to kind of be a little tough on it at first. Once you're kind of down a little bit and it starts to lighten up, then you can see that now you want to start working with the grain. Once you get it down to a lighter, almost bare surface, you want to just kind of work with the grain always with your sandpaper. Okay, so at first kind of rough, but then eventually you want to go nice and smooth with the grain. Keep those lines, those sandpaper lines down, and going with the grain instead of against the grain. The other thing is feathering, and we'll talk about that some other time, but feathering is important too. You don't want to go against the grain at a corner, you want to go with the grain. So you can kind of get aggressive at first, but then you want to always come back to going with the grain. You want to blend the color to be about the same as all the other areas on the project. Okay, all awesome. You can already see I've only worked on this for a little while. Not all of it was on camera, and I've already ready to change some sandpaper here. So I've already cut my sandpaper, and it's a quarter. These are quarter sheets. So you take a regular sheet of sandpaper, and you can see it gets kind of gummed up with that ugly finish that they had. And so once it gets to a certain point, it's not effective anymore. It doesn't actually do its job. So, buy enough sandpaper where you can do that. Here's another already cut sheet, and throw it in the sander. And there's little clips that hold it in. Get that in there. And now it's ready to rock and roll. All right, here we go again. wanted to give you a little update on where we're at here. I've been sanding for about 45 minutes here, and I got this panel just about rough sanded well, and this panel about halfway, about halfway. And now I have to switch from a palm sander kind of thing to a hand sander. Because you can't get back into those little tight areas with the palm sander. It's just too big. So it's a lot of sanding. But we'll be working on these a little bit more. Like I said before, I don't like to go more than a couple hours in, thinking about the neighborhood, but somebody's cleaning their house with a power washer, so I'm just going to keep on working while he is. Okay. I'm also starting to get down into here, and on this side is pretty close. A little bit of paint sanding it right back in the corner. On these particular speakers, I don't have to go all the way back. The shadows cover a lot, so I want to go back as far as basically you can see before the shadow starts to take over. It's pretty much completely dark back there, so I want to get back as far as I can. But the person who did this before only went back so far, and then it was a hard line. And they blended it okay because they were using a stain, but it was still pretty awful. So I'm working on getting a lot of that worked out. But you can tell it's taking a while. And I'm getting full of sanding dust. So a couple of things for you to note. If you're doing a sanding job like this, I already mentioned blending. You kind of get into the corners a little bit easier, roughly at first, but that really leaves a very hard to work with kind of a edge going against the grain. So you want to be careful that you're not digging in too much there. You want to get it clean, obviously, but then once you get it clean, you have to kind of go blend it in a lot. So you're going with the grain now, and instead of it's easy to just kind of go and remove all of that stuff, but then you have a really distinct line right there, and so you want to start then blending it in to the wood, so it looks as if it was never really done at all. As you're going along the project, you got your various sanders, you got your various grits, you got a rag, and you want to make sure that you're wiping the surfaces down every so often just to see where you're at. Okay? So far so good. Probably work on it for another hour or so. We'll see how far we get. Okay, so now I have gotten to a point where I can go no further on this orientation with the 80 grit rough sanding sandpaper. So I'm ready to start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fine sand it. So I'm going to go to a different grain of sandpaper, and then I'm going to smooth it out on all the sides that I can reach from this angle, and then I'm going to flip it upside down and do it all over again. So it's important that you do a couple of things here. One thing is, and I forgot to mention this, when you're sanding a piece of furniture like this with a palm sander of any kind, you want to make sure that you don't round the edges. It's really easy to. As you're working on a surface, it's so easy just to kind of, and that obviously doesn't do anybody any good. This is a 90-degree sharp angle on purpose, and it should stay that way. So just be really careful. Okay, so we're doing our finish sanding now. I just wanted to kind of show you some basic skills. when you're finished sanding something, uh, you've done the 80 grit all over. You've gotten rid of all the old stain, all the old polyurethane, whatever it was on there. But you left a lot of lines, a lot of grooves. It's very kind of gritty. It's not very smooth. That's what this is doing. We're smoothing it down. We're every layer. Now it's important to do all the different layers of sandpaper, is because you're trying to get so that each time you sand it with the higher grades or higher grit sandpaper, you're getting rid of the grooves of the previous sandpaper. So it's important not to miss a step. Okay, so you have to have, the layers of sandpaper, and then when you're doing the 120 grit, that's a great time to do some of the things that the finish sander doesn't do well. It looks like, I've already done the 120 here, and you can see it's a lot smoother now, and it's a lot more uniform in color. And I was able to use the 120 grit to kind of get rid of some of those nasty areas. I could have gotten with 80 grit, but 80 grit's really aggressive, so you don't want to hit delicate areas with 80 grit. So 120 grit is good for that area, and then I did 180 grit, and now I'm starting the 220. When you're doing the 180 and the 220 especially, you want to cover the entire surface with the grain, just back and forth. You'll see that it takes not really a whole lot of time to do that, but it's a very important step for when you want the piece of furniture to look, real finished. You just go with the grain and go the whole length of it. Just remember, all you're trying to do is take out the grooves from the previous grade sandpaper. So you don't spend a whole lot of time on each surface. You move pretty quickly. All right, so I'm just going to do the 220 pass on the top here and show you how that is. I'll get my safety gear. Okay, here we go. Come back with a rag and you kind of dust that off, and you can already tell the surface is starting to feel like glass. It's getting very smooth. I'm just going to do it one more time. Just make sure you do this a lot. You're basically, whenever you slap it, it knocks out some of the dust already that's in there. So when you get this kind of real smooth sandpaper, you can go through it pretty quickly. But that's one way to kind of save it. haven't got any dust that time. So this side, this one side right now is at 220. So it is as smooth as the baby's bottom. Now I got the rest of all this to do, and then we'll flip it over and we'll do the same thing. We'll start over again, and then we got a whole nother speaker to do. So stay tuned. Exciting times. Okay, so we've gotten through today with only one done instead of the two that I had hoped for. So it was about 4 hours it took to do that, and I was pretty tired at the end of it, so I didn't want to do any more with the neighborhood factor, and plus it was just one of those, you know, I'm just tired. So 4 hours is enough for a day. But this guy is ready for oil, and then I'm going to go with some kind of a okay, so today we spent about 4 hours sanding just one of these things. This is it right here. This guy right here is a real pain in the butt. It took a really long time to get through the material that they had used last time on this thing. It was, you know, real gummy. I think I explained before, but it was especially he just loaded it up on the inside, so it was really an awful job to get it off. And I went through a lot of sandpaper and a lot of time, and so it took a long time, a lot longer than I thought. Like I said, about 4 hours. And looks pretty good now though. So this is finished sanded to a 240 grit on all sides, a 220 grit on all sides, and then basically ready for whatever finish I'm going to put on it. The other one is kind of right next to where the camera is, and it is it's about half done. I got it started, but you know, I was pretty tired, so I was just kind of like, you know, I'm gonna have some dinner and call it a day. So decided to do that. So I only got 1 and maybe a quarter done of what I planned on today, but I am happy with what we got going, and it turned out real nice and no major mistakes, and it's all fairly, you know, rugged as far as the wood goes, so it wasn't terribly I wasn't terribly worried, but there is some veneers and stuff like that you have to worry about burning through, and you have to apply a lot of pressure when you're doing this stuff. There is, you know, there are some areas where you just can't get a sandpaper in there very easily. There's other areas that it's going to be fairly shadowed and didn't get as fully as it was when it was built. But that too is, you know, not exactly what we're aiming for here. This is a piece of antique. It's going to have some age to it. No matter what I do to it, it's going to look like it's pretty old, and it is. You know, these things were made in the 70s, so you know, so 40 to 50 years old. Yep. So anyways, this one is ready to go. The other one's not, but we got a good start, and we're closer to being done than we were before. Here's the other one. It's You know, it's got a lot done already on it. It's rough sanded pretty much everywhere except for parts of the inside area. Okay, so I guess that's it for now. Kind of a productive day in the garage. Got some work done. Feeling good about it. I've already been showered and clean clothes, and boy, you really get covered with the dust. That's something about wearing that mask, making sure you wear that mask, because boy, by the end of the day, you've been doing it for several hours, it is just loaded on you, and you have to shake off your clothes, and can you just imagine that getting all in your lungs and stuff? So take precautions when you're doing this stuff. These are fun hobbies, but use your head. It's not as danger-free as it always could appear to be, and so think about that. Okay, so until next time, I appreciate you watching. Take care.